And we are back with Rebecca Volpano, VP of Product Marketing with Cielo. He's most open to new opportunities the minute after we record the weekly show. By the way, I heard QR codes are really hot now, so keep that in mind for all your most progressive.
If you haven't heard of them before, he's a big fan.
QR code. Buy, build, or partner. You mentioned building your own stuff. You're partnered with other products. Talk about how you guys decide the moment when we build something versus partnering or buying a solution.
So for us, we've always kind of, aside from the last 2 years where we're now building our own tools, we've really been in kind of that partner mode. And that's because there's so much great technology in the space. I mean, recently at even some of the conferences we've been at, we've had an opportunity to see a lot of new up-and-comers, a lot of best-in-class tools. But what we at Cielo, and I know every organization says this, we feel a little bit unique and different in what we might need from an organization. And so in the past, there's typically been a point in our partnership where we are like, okay, our roadmaps are kind of going off into two different directions. There's a clear fork in the road. And, you know, for us to be a good partner, it would mean kind of giving up some of the development that we'd be looking for from that partner. And then vice versa, you know, they want to keep us happy. So for us, it was really seeing a clear opportunity in the market to come up with something a little bit different, to lean into generative AI, to leverage our expertise in hiring over the past 2 decades and build something on our own. But generally, you know, partnering has been one that we have done and will continue to do too.
And it sounds almost like you have it down to a science because, to be quite frank, a lot of these startups, if they are popular, they are successful, they're definitely going to go their own way, one way or the other. If you're lucky, they're going to stay on your track as long as they can. But until then, I mean, there's got to be some R&D in the background just to be there. So when you are looking at that full scope, because there's so much out there today, are you looking at a lot of the earlier startups so that you can actually try to help them, you know, and possibly help them with their roadmap? Or is it mid-level to some of these bigger organizations like Paradox? Because I mean, Paradox has a pretty sizable portfolio now.
Yeah, good question. For a few of us in the organization, we definitely look at those newcomers, startups, try to see, you know, how we can potentially influence their roadmap, if there would be an opportunity for us to work together. That's personally one of my favorite spots to be. When we think about introducing something to our clients, we're generally on kind of that mid-size to larger, best-in-class tool when we're going to bring something new to a client partnership. But again, we have clients who are open to trying something new and working with a startup. So it's a little bit of everything. But yeah, depending on who you ask in the organization, we definitely have some individuals who are really passionate about driving product roadmap for startups.
Diversity and inclusion has really been under fire, at least in the headlines lately, whether it's Kid Rock shooting up some Bud Light or other things that we've seen in the headlines. But we do know that a lot of companies, majority of, are still embracing diversity and inclusion. How are your customers looking at this issue, and how are they going to you for help?
It's changed slightly. I mean, I would say in the last year, we've seen some diversity and inclusion initiatives kind of take the back seat. We've seen some organizations ramp up their diversity and inclusivity practices. I think for us, again, with the tech focus, we're thinking about how is generative AI going to make an impact on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is it going to make it easier for more people to get in front of a hiring manager, the right people? Is it going to make it easier for someone to craft their resume? Are we going to ask better questions in interviews to really understand a candidate's capability versus, you know, just asking some basic questions about, you know, if they're going to be the right fit for the job? So I think we're going to see it shift a bit. And I can understand the market is a bit nervous about leaning too heavily into AI for things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I do think that there's an opportunity for us to use tech and really, I think, remove a lot of the bias in the process that we see today.
They'd be a lot less nervous if there was constant auditing. that was
So
happening.
true.
Right?
Yes.
So, and again, another opportunity for, a partner to be able to take that on. Education, the auditing, all these pieces put in place. How far do you think we are from actually having a full package to be able to have a TA leader, talent management leader, what have you, start to be educated to the point and then also feel they're not as risk averse because you do have those pieces in place? How far do you think we are away from that today?
I think we're really close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Cielo has built a lot of those things to help that TA leader get to that point. We're also seeing so much legislation being either considered or passed and going into effect in mid 2025 to mid 2026. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting year for us. I had a meeting with our chief product officer last week where he called it the peak hype or peak risk hype moment, where he feels like this is going to be all eyes are on TA, all eyes are on tech, all eyes are trying to determine how we leverage generative AI. And so with that in mind, Cielo has really built, I think, the toolkit that leaders can use to determine, where they're at in that process and how quickly they can get generative AI built into their process.
So being a company who works with global organizations,
Yep.
and we talked about, well, we didn't talk about GDPR, but we're going to. So Europe,
Yes.
they also have their own AI versions of regulations and whatnot, and they seem to be much more progressive than the U.S. is right now.
Yep.
So where would your organization actually set the baseline? Is it pretty much the most stringent of those regulations, or are you going to try to play whack-a-mole with Europe, California, New York, and then everything in between? That just seems so hard and almost unmanageable.
Yeah, it is definitely an art and a science to try and figure out how are we going to approach all of the regulation and how do we translate it for our organization. I would say that what we saw with GDPR was that we were all able to kind of follow European standards because they were a bit more strictly, and then that made way for California regulations and what we saw in New York. So I think right now for us, it's really using the European vantage point of generative AI as kind of the beacon, this is where we'd like to be, but let's use the regulations that are coming out in California and New York as kind of the goalposts, if you will, so that we can operate compliantly in all of our regions, because obviously that is critically important.
Curious about the technologies that you're most bullish on over the next couple of years.
Seeing generative AI and prompt playgrounds is going to be really big.
Talk a little bit about that real quick.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
It is really fun. It's really fun. So what we've built are essentially prompts, so generative AI prompt language on top of, right now it's about 6 large language models that we use.
Okay.
And what we're doing is we're running use cases through each one of the LLMs to determine which one has the best answer. And best answer could mean a couple of different things. It could mean the most accurate answer. So when we think about leveraging generative AI for knowledge-based type responses. So if you think about hey, tell me about what it's like to work at the company. What are the benefits like? What's the PTO? All of that. We want an LLM that's going to kind of toe that line and give them the right response. We could also be looking at something to give us the most creative response. So when we're thinking about marketing, when we're thinking about sales, we use other LLMs to really help us identify more creative responses and ways to leverage that. So we run a variety of different use cases through our prompt playground. And yeah, I think leaning into Gen AI is going to be the biggest thing for us in the next couple of years. And what I mean by that is, can we use generative AI to refine our entire job description library? Can we pull skills out of existing job descriptions? Can we infer skills based on existing job descriptions? Can we translate a job advertisement into not only multiple languages, but also contextually, what does a different region want to hear in a job ad compared to another region. So those are some of the things that that we use Gen AI for today. And I think we're going to see like a bigger push in that direction, or I hope that we see a bigger push in that direction in the next couple of years.
A company called Klarna has made headlines recently saying that they are making their own homemade concoction to say goodbye to tools like Salesforce and even Workday. We're seeing more and more startups hoping to replace customer service people, salespeople, marketing people. I'm not hearing a lot of fear around those things. Why?
This is a controversial opinion that maybe I hold, but I think that by making everything more accessible, we're going to actually drive an increased demand. And so I do think that we see jobs changing for sure. You know, the customer service example, I was talking with someone the other day, and they said that they were actually experiencing quite a bit of attrition in their call center because they'd automated 90% of the person's job, and they were only left with the really tough stuff to do. And how fun is that? Like, you don't have any, you know, quick wins.
No joy.
No joy.
Yeah.
We've robbed them of their joy. Not us personally. But you know, so I think again, like, I see more demand for services. I see more demand for technology. I see things becoming more accessible and organizations feeling more comfortable and confident with tech, that they are buying more, that there's more for everyone. So I have a bit of an abundance mindset when it comes to tech. And how it will impact our industry. And absolutely, the jobs will change for sure. But if you have generative AI in your pocket, kind of helping you, like, upskill you as an assistant along the way, I think there's opportunity for all of us to kind of grow with it.
That is Rebecca Volpano, VP of Product Marketing at Cielo. Rebecca, for our viewers who want to know more about you or connect with the company, where do you send them?
Yeah, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to continue this conversation.
Love it. And that is Volpano, like volcano. Chad, that is another one in the can.